So there's a strategy of trying to solve short words and matching them with the most common words. And so that would be one way of generating an option. But another is letter frequency. And I don't calculate the frequency, but I learned when I did cryptograms when I was younger that ETOANISH is like the most frequent in order, the top most frequent, and that I kind of use that as a guideline. Now, I also use ideas about whether things are vowels or not, and a C is could be next to an R and an H, but probably not a Q.
I'm curious. Are these structure building codelets? Do you think? I mean, when you say strategy, I'm wondering if there's something procedural memory related that could be going on here.
Yeah. See, it can get some of these strategies can get very complex, and they're probably not implemented. Probably not implemented in a single cognitive cycle.
There might be some behavior stream that you have.
Yeah, and that kind of complexity is not something we can address on the first pass. And so back to Poulin's point, I think there's an argument that some of the simple ones we're doing might be a simple structure building codelet, and it might not be. But we're trying to get not just the bits of this lined up, we're trying to get the dynamic of having a single cognitive cycle that then we can crank a few times and make some progress on the puzzle to get a multi-cyclic thing going. So it's kind of a juggling act.
And I would assume that learning, if we want to continue with this specific example after we complete the agent, that learning structure building codelets could be another thing that we attempt. So, all right. So the next two things, global workspace and action selection, are, I don't think I need to explain global workspace and action selection, but in a cryptocode agent, this would just be for the initial instance pipelines, moving the cognitive content from the workspace through to broadcasted to action selection, not nowhere else for right now, which would mean no learning as far as I can tell.
No, I mean, I think you will definitely do some learning in PAM, because when you make an association of one letter with, when you create a substitution, that will be learned in PAM. So there is no way to get around it, I guess.
If does it have to be learned in PAM if it persists in the workspace? If it keeps getting
to consciousness, then it does.
Yeah, if it comes to consciousness, but if we don't implement learning, we could in our agent still implement a way whereby the workspace pairing of the two doesn't decay away because it keeps getting reinforced by a conscious broadcast or by some other thing in the workspace that may activate it.
If you're going to have a conscious broadcast that reinforces the workspace, you might as well have it reinforce PAM, and that's what...
Well, see, for me personally, I don't know if I create a new PAM node for A equals E, because I write down an E on top of the A, and then I have A equals E in my transient episodic memory, but it keeps getting reinforced every time I look at the page and I see the E next to the A. So I'm not convinced in the human case that it works like that. I mean, it might.
But you might very well want to do the same thing and have the agent write it.
Have the or have some way of, that's what updating the puzzle is going to be, is to change the visual input so that it somehow reflects the solution state of the puzzle.
What you are doing
without having to learn.
I think you're going to have to learn.
What you are doing is because of limited working memory capacity of humans, and if you are reinforcing the workspace in that agent, you are essentially saying that that agent has a huge working memory capacity.
Well, didn't we say that the relationship between the workspace and working memory was not exactly straightforward?
That's not straightforward, but
and it's because of the global workspace that we have that limitation. And Stan and Bernie have argued that there's no evidence of any pre-conscious limitation, and that's why we have the profligacy in the model to where everything gets
Okay, yeah, so
instantiated.
you'll be updating it in the workspace, but that is more like a constraint on the queue and then the
Conscious content queue and the width of the broadcast. Yeah,
Okay.
that's a good way to look at it. Yeah, this is, and we don't really we can't actually address these issues until we get multiple cycles actually cranking through. So to a certain extent, we have to kind of put them on the side or come up with a temporary solution that'll just make it easy for us to get the first pass going. And we just need to notate and know that we're doing, maybe there's a third column over here, that this is the ideal agent, and there's a third column over here, the first pass, what we're going to actually do, and we can get an experiment going over here, and then come back and try to answer some of these questions.
I don't know if we need to, I guess, I was just talking about the global workspace with the action selection. Also, I have currently written down as a pipeline, but that could change, I guess. So, the last part of this, I have sort of
You're not going to have an action execution.
Well, action selection would be, I have written down on here as a pipeline directly from the global workspace to action execution. I'm not sure if that's how it should be at the end, in our end result.
I think it's probably pretty cheap to just add action execution as a separate module, and even if it's not doing.
Make it also a pipeline, is that what you're saying?
Well, I think that should be the thing that's interfacing with your environment changes and what's actually specifying how to change your environment. So I don't think there's much cost, even if like with procedural memory, if you just had a pass through in procedural memory to have a one-to-one mapping between each one of these options and an action.
Okay.
I mean, it's that way at least you're preserving the module with very little cost.
Right.
So in other words, put procedural memory before action selection,
That's
and it can just be a pipeline.
And then procedural memory would have, I mean, would we have to have the concept of schemes and behaviors if the contents of consciousness are?
I think you can make it pretty simple. I mean, I don't think you have to go full out,
Okay.
at least for the first pass.
Yeah. And then the action execution can specify how the agent actually carries out. If it says, I want to set A equals to M and update the puzzle, that's my action selected. And then the action execution can figure out how to actually change the environment so that it has appropriately modified visual input on the next cycle.
I think there's some benefits. I mean, even if you have a really simplistic implementation, having the modules, I mean, you have a lot of people that aren't going to be familiar with LIDA at all.
Right.
And actually showing this entire cognitive cycle, even if you don't have a really rich implementation for each one, I think is illustrative just by itself to explain, okay, well, procedural memory has this responsibility, action selection has this responsibility. And then, I mean,
Okay.
I think there's a benefit to it.
My plan was to show the simplified version, just a flow chart of all of the modules that would be used in the agent, as well as probably the whole LIDA model, and draw comparisons. Do you disagree with that?
No, I mean, that's great. I think the more you can explain the entire diagram, the better.
Sure. And so this is just a sort of whole diagram of input. You have a sample puzzle that you look at, and within one saccade you were able to pick up the image of PDQM, and this would go into PAM, and you would have some sort of visual to lexicon or lexical conversion, where this is converted to the concept of the letters PDQM. I'm not really sure what to do right now with semantic associations. And this would interact with the structure building code that's looking for specific conversions. And these
okay, so in the workspace, the structure is saying, I'm going to change M to D and make that assignment. That's the option that you're in that lexical token. I can't read it. PDQM. So what is the structure representing in the workspace? I think I just missed it.
So you have some sort of example puzzle, and PDQ is the first
Lexical
image.
token that you're, yeah.
And then there's this visual to lexical conversion, and then that brings in several different
Okay,
concepts.
so these are PAM nodes that
nodes
were
with-
activated because you recognized in that token M and D were in there.
And there are others, these are just
Okay,
examples.
so yeah, so technically you'd have like P and Q
Right.
potentially there on that same structure.
And
Okay.
those lines aren't really anything other than thematic links between the nodes. So,
Okay. So PDQM really can be considered in when we talk about this, the dangling sensory content and some of it. This is the stuff
Yes.
that came from sensory memory, and then you're going to recognize some stuff. And so if you did not recognize anything out of that, if that was even possible, then you just have a blank node and PDQM.
My semantic association is PDQ pretty darn quick. And PDQ Bach. And what is PDQ Bach? That's an actual person who did some, like, it's.
No, that's the name of a record when it first came out.
Yeah, I think there was
disc.
a person who called himself PDQ Bach and released that record, I believe.
I thought it was just the name of the record.
You may be right.
I
I may be misremembering it.
Yeah.
Okay, but so anyway, that's the idea of what I mean by semantic association. And the example I gave was CCRG would have no semantic association to a lot of people. But for us, it clearly would. Even if we saw it in a CryptoQuip puzzle and we knew it didn't stand for Cognitive Computing Research Group, I think it would still be triggered.
Automatically.
Sure. I don't really know how that would work in the agent right now. And as to what semantic abbreviations it recognizes, things like that.
So if since your talk is coming up relatively soon, if you guys aren't able to flesh that out, I guess you probably want to pluck it out of your presentation. It's semantic. I mean, unless you can concretely speak about semantic associations, you're not going to want to have something in your slide that you can't explain very well.
No, sure, right.
But yeah, it's here as a placeholder. And instead of the question mark, he could have just put in parentheses, placed here to keep Strain happy. So, I mean, but I think if you do the thing, if one of your strategies is word substitution, of taking a, four-letter word, PDQM, could it be, what's a common four-letter word? Talk. Huh?
Is that what I want to say?
Go ahead.
Talk. Okay, so maybe it's talk, or something like that. And now that if I get an input that's P, if I set D equal to A and Q equal to L, and then I update the puzzle, then what I'm going to get in might be capital P A L capital M. When I'm saying the capital being the unsolved letters, that might trigger something semantic. It could trigger call. It could trigger talk. It could trigger tail.
Sure.
And so there's got to be some. In order to generate options intelligently, there's going to be some semantic association when you relate it to a known word. I think. Isn't that a semantic association?
So you would have some sort of dictionary or a word list.
We could implement it that way.
And that would be.
I don't think it necessarily happens that way in humans. Do you? How do you think it works in humans?
I don't know, but I think we have this huge 100,000 word dictionary as part of PAM.
But it's implemented like a tractor landscape or sparse distributed memory where things pop out.
Yeah.
And it's not it's a searchable list the way a computer list is.
But going back to the presentation kind of a thing, here you've got this example will be unreadable for people back there. And no, I'm not trying to get you to fix
Sure.
it where I can read it.
Oh, okay.
I want to talk about the whole thing.
He's given feedback to change for
In
the.
terms of a presentation in the future?
No,
for Inker.
Okay.
yeah. What I'm saying is, notice that Sean said there was something else in there that he couldn't read.
What was it?
Well,
Well,
part of it, I wasn't, yeah, so the.
Oh, sorry. So hold on, he's not done. Hold
I'm
on,
not done at all.
sorry.
What I suggest you do in a case like this is to take out the example, blow up to the other, and put the example, line it up across the top, or some way that you can be concerned about size and about being seen at the back of the room.
So you mean, so just eliminate the column on the left and then make the whole thing fill up the entire slide?
Except that you can fill it up going this way, but bring it down a little and blow some of the example up and put it at the top. What
Yeah, I'll
I'm
make the
saying
example
is,
bigger.
be more concerned about
Size.
having things, don't put something on the slide that can't be read in the back of the room.
Okay.
What's a good font size guideline? I mean, is there a clear, I mean, like 20-point fonts? Does anyone know what a good suggestion is for font
Well,
size?
I remember trying to use, whenever I could, to use 44.
Yeah, well, if Stan can see it, then
You know,
it will be visible. by
44,
to us,
and
I think.
like, is that a general rule for
No,
something
that's
like?
not a general rule.
Okay, well, if there was a general rule,
Don't
something that-
go under 24.
is something that you can see on here comparable to something? This, I'm going to be presenting this as a poster.
Is that just personal
So,
experience
Yeah, poster
or?
presentation, what I use.
Oh, you're gonna
I'll put it
present it as a poster?
This is, well, Inker's poster presentation.
Okay, well, somebody, the first hit says the
sorry.
same as you.
I,
And I'm fairly sure Inker is a poster presentation. So, it would be good to.
things are quite different in a poster because you can get right up on it.
Okay, so do you
Yeah.
think it's as pertinent?
I've got two websites that second what Kevin says, don't use anything smaller than 24 points. And I have one that says, with Stan, he says, I use a minimum 44 font size for the headings and minimum 36 point for all. Others, too much info in a slide gets confusing and hard to read. That sounds like this guy was in a class with Stan. And so,
Okay.
But go ahead.
That's all it combines with structure building code that creates structures with the lexical information that was passed from Ham that combines with attention codelets to form coalitions, and that just gets passed straight to action execution as far as for right now.
well, the option with the highest activation is going to get selected. And so, as Sean said, we can put empty modules that it goes through. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, I would say just to sort of have a very basic procedural memory, and maybe action selections can be very simple as well in this case, you know, and so action execution can be what actually does change your environment to update your puzzle.
Right.
So I think in a lot of respects, you know, it is just kind of a pipeline where it's just flowing through, and not a lot of logic is going to operate on your option once it gets broadcast out. But I think there's some value to retaining just those simple implementations for.
So it wouldn't go straight, it would just pass through all of these empty, here's quasi-empty modules.
Well, which is sort of like going straight, like if I eat something and it goes straight through me, you know, it's still. Sorry.
It doesn't come
Sorry, I've had extensive therapy and I clearly need more of it. Okay. All right.
Well, that's all I have.
One thing that you might want to consider doing, it seems like it's been useful. I saw Steve do it in one of his presentations, and I copied it. By using the definition of autonomous agents, give that, and then describe in basic details your sensors, your actuators, you know, and your motivations. I think, and you know, that might help to explain what the overall agent is doing and introduce your problem. In some respects, it might help you to bring all this stuff together. But I found it was very useful
I think
Those
Kevin
are
also
my-
did that, didn't you do that? Didn't you?
Yeah,
I mentioned that, yeah,
Okay.
I agree with that.
yeah, so I think overall, it's just a good idea to just go and explain that.
I agree.
I thought that was thank you, I thought that was very useful. It was useful for me, Chandler, and I hope it was useful for you.
This is very helpful. Thank you for letting me do this.
Yeah, it was a great discussion with it too. I learned something.
And that's hard to do.
Yeah.